Welcome to Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to minrovers.org. And now let's get into this Tuesday evening presentation.
You're here tonight to hear from Cliff Jacobson. Cliff is a writer and a consultant. He's written lots of books on camping. Many of you have probably seen them. I used to see them all the time at places like Midwest Mountaineering. He's been involved in outdoor stuff since he was exploring the Boundary Waters as a scout. He's done that extensively and talks at lots of outdoor events, including the Expo and Canoecopia and things like that. He received the Legends of Paddling Award from the American Canoeing Association and has a blog on his website where you can read about camping tips, read about canoe adventures, and some of his thoughts. And tonight he's going to talk to us about camping's top secrets. So welcome, Cliff, and take it away.
Okay, I'll be honest. I turned 82 this year. So does that mean I'm not doing this stuff anymore? Nope, I'm still doing it. And no, I'm not doing the wild Canadian river trips with the heavy duty portages anymore. I'm over that. But this last year, well, it was coming off COVID. It was a little dicey. We did the Buffalo again. We encountered extremely high water, flood stage. The river was up 6 feet, which brings us to another point on the Buffalo. Remember, the Buffalo is a runoff river. It has a rock bottom on it. When it rains, that river can come up 5 or 6 feet in a few hours. So if you camp along the Buffalo, go way up and bring your boats up with you, or you could find them floating all the way down to the White River the following morning. But I want to say this because a lot of us have gray hairs now, and there's this thought that, oh, well, we just can't do this anymore. Let me tell you this. If you were a good paddler or camper when you were young, you're going to be a good paddler and camper when you're older. Yeah, there's a few things you have to deal with. For example, I love whitewater, and I'm still very good. I think I'm still very good in whitewater. The only thing I've noticed at my age, and I paddle solo canoe almost exclusively now, is that I'm a little slower on the uptake. In other words, if I need to ferry or do an eddy turn or something like that, I have to give myself just a few more seconds of time than I used to. Other than that, no difference. My camping skills are just the same as they were before. So I want to say to those of you who are like me or getting gray hair, hey, if you were good when you're young, you're going to be good when you're old. Don't worry about it. Have fun. Go out and do it. So, okay, what we're going to see, what we're going to see today is I'm going to share with you some camping's top secrets. But before I begin, I just want to have a little disclaimer, and it goes like this. You guys are an unusual group, and you're an unusual group because you want to learn something. I'm going to say that again. You want to learn something. Most people don't. Most people, if they're having problems camping, canoeing, or whatever, they want to buy something to solve their problem. If they're hitting rocks, they need a stronger canoe. God forbid they'd ever learn how to paddle. If they're getting water in their tent at night, it's a bad tent. They need a better tent. No, they need some skills. The problem is nobody's teaching skills anymore. People are just selling stuff. So with these thoughts in mind, everything we're going to do today, you're going to find in my book, Camping's Top Secrets. This is the newly revised edition. And let's see if I can figure out how to go to, oh, here we go. I want to say a few words about another book of mine. This is my teen book. I wrote this for teenagers. It's called Justin Cody's Race to Survival. And I wrote this out of frustration because I got tired of seeing all these gray-haired people in the wilderness and wondering how I could get kids involved. So I said, I have an idea. I'm going to write a high-adventure novel that'll drag them in, but it's really going to be a how-to canoe and camp book in disguise. In other words, they're going to learn a bunch of stuff from it. Now, I thought this was a really great idea until I tried to get it published. I thought it'd be easy since I've authored, I don't know, 15, 16 books, something like that on the outdoors. Wrong. Here's what happened. Fiction publishers said this is viewed it as nonfiction because it's got a lot of how-to stuff in it. Nonfiction publishers viewed it as fiction. So neither one knew how to market it. And I queried like 40 publishers, couldn't even get anybody to read it. Till finally, a little publishing company in Minneapolis, 10,000 Lakes Press, two young guys were willing to take a chance on it. So I bring this up to you because this book's a little bit patterned after my grandson, who I love very dearly, but he has his head in his cell phone all the time. Okay, if he doesn't have electricity to run his to run his iPhone or whatever, he's miserable. Okay, I took him up to the Boundary Waters once. He hated every minute of it, but he's a wonderful kid, and I have to face the fact that he's just probably not going to like wild places. But if you have a teenager in your life that maybe you want to educate a little bit, trust me, the story will drag him in. Okay, next, I'm easy to get a hold of. As if you want to email me, you can email me at info@cliffcanoe.com and I'll get right back to you. I usually try to get back to people in a day or so. And finally, all my books are available on my website, but I have to be honest with you, I cannot compete with Amazon. I just can't. What I can do is autograph them, which I do, write you a nice note, and so forth. But you can find all my books on my website. And if you want to get them for less money, there's a little box you can click on there that'll take you right to Amazon. You can buy them from Amazon and save a few bucks. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks. And before I do, I want to list what I think are the 7 most important things. If you can do these things, you'll be a hero to your friends. They are: 1, make a one-match fire in the rain. And oh yeah, some of you are thinking that's easy, huh? Yeah. Okay, you try it when it's the wind is blowing bloody murder and it's raining. You still should be able to do it. Oh yes, by the way, it's probably harder in the Boundary Waters canoe area than any place else on the planet. Why? Because all the good wood's been picked over. And because the Forest Service has convinced you should leave your axe at home, your splitting tool. Sorry, I don't buy it. All right, next, know how to stormproof your camp. We're going to deal with both the fire and stormproofing in this presentation. Next, sleep and work comfortably on a bad site. Yeah, I know what a lot of the outdoor books say. They have a big formula for find this beautiful thing, whatever. But the point is, you usually can't do that because in many cases, either in the Boundary Waters, the Forest Service has laid out where the site is, and it may not be particularly good tent site. Or if you go to northern Canada, like I do, try the bush in Ontario and see if you can even find a flat spot to put a tent. Okay, we'll deal with that. Next, be a good navigator. Don't get lost. There are probably some people out there that are thinking, hey, I got a GPS. I'm going to download all the stuff on my GPS or my cell phone and live happily ever after. Well, folks, that's buying things to solve your problem, not learning how to solve your problem. The first time your GPS goes down or your phone goes down and you're forced to use a map and compass, you're going to understand the importance of actually knowing the basics. And you can learn the basics pretty quickly. By the way, I should say, my little book, Basic Illustrated Map and Compass, was actually evolved from when I wrote the map and compass materials for the Department of Natural Resources. And then I used that when I taught school. That book was essentially the navigation curriculum for my 8th grade environmental science class. So if you can, if 8th graders can understand it, so can you. All right, next, prepare great meals without fuss. You know, I'm sorry, I got a couple of freeze-dried meals the other day from a new company. I'm not going to tell you the name of the new company. And I was asked to evaluate them. So my wife and I, we made them according to directions. We even went a step further. We cozied them up. And they were nice and warm, kept them nice and warm for more than even the allotted time. And both of them were terrible. I don't mean bad. I mean worse than bad. They were awful. And you know what? Most of these things are awful. And the reason why, those of you who cook out there, you know, different products cook at different speeds. You can't put everything in a bag and add boiling water and expect all this stuff to get done and taste good. But there are some tricks. You don't have to spend money on that fancy freeze-dried food. You can make it at home, simple. And you know what? The actual cooking time is only going to be less than 5 minutes longer than this boil in the bag deals. Okay. And last but not least, next, waterproof your gear, make it bomb-proof. I don't care whether you're going to the high Arctic or you're going to the boundary waters. The difference is the boundary waters will give you a second chance. The Arctic won't. So adopt some expedition procedures and you'll be happy no matter where you go. And finally, learn how to tie 3 quick release knots. Now, I know what you're thinking. Cliff, you got a knot book out there with dozens of knots in it. Yes, I do. And so do a lot of other people. But guess what? You don't need all those knots. What you need are 3. I could argue for a 4th. You could really twist my leg and maybe I could scream possibly for a 5th, but you'll get along just fine with 3. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to go through this, and then I would suggest that you guys go ahead and put your questions up if you have them. And then Stacy will read them at the end of the presentation, and I'll stay here as long as you guys still have questions. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. First, let's talk about stormproofing your tent. As you can see, we lost this one. There's no such thing as a self-supporting tent, period. It doesn't exist. And the reason why tents blow down is because people don't know how to stormproof it. Now, there's a little game that manufacturers play, and it goes like this. My tent's lighter than your tent. My tent's more compact than your tent. All right, stop. How do we make a tent lighter? Well, most of the weight is in the poles. Okay, so we can cheat on the poles and use crummy poles, lighter poles, poles that are going to break apart in a high wind. What else can we do to cut weight? Well, there's not much we can do to cut fabric. Oh, what we can do is we can use what's called a cap fly on a tent. That means the fly doesn't stake all the way to the ground. It's got about 6 inches of airspace. Manufacturers will tell you this is for ventilation. It's to save bulk and weight and a few cents, period. You don't want a tent that has a space between the fly and the ground. You want that covered. And last but not least, you can cut stakes. Now, a tent stake say a tent stake weighs 1.5 ounces. If you can set up that tent with 4 stakes, you got 6 ounces in stakes. But if you have to use 10 stakes, oh my, that's going to be heavier, and it's not going to look so good when Dingaling Packing Magazine comes out every year with their top lightweight tents. All right, so let's look at things you can do to your tent. This is actually a home-built copy of a Cannondale rustic tent, which still remains my favorite tent. But I want you to look and see what was done here. He's got a loop right here at the top. So you can run a guy line out to the front or to a tree. If you get a headwind, that'll keep your tent up. He's got another one here, and he's got another one here. Here's one, here's another one here. Why do you want all these things? Because if you get a wind of 50 or 60 miles an hour, and you will get those if you do a trip on the tundra, if you, or even in the subarctic, you can have winds of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. My first trip on the Hood River in Canada's Northwest Territories, we had a wind gauge, and for 48 hours, we were clocking wind speeds of 62 miles an hour. You can't even stand up in that, okay? So you need to have storm tabs. Now, why don't tents come with them? A lot of reasons. First of all, most people are never going to do this. They're never going to camp when you got a 40 or 50 mile an hour wind. They're going to take the tent down, hop in their Volvo, and drive home. That's the first thing. Secondly, most people only use a tent about a week a year, according to marketing studies. So, and that's going to be under ideal conditions. So better to cut the weight, cut the bulk, make people think that they're getting something of real value for their money, when instead they're getting a tent that's going to blow down or destruct. So we're going to look at things that you can do to your tent to make it survive. This is some of them. All right. This is from my book, Camping's Top Secrets. This is just one way to do a dome. Now, here's the thing about domes. The Inuits developed ice domes, igloos. They were rigid structures. They didn't blow down. When the white man copied them, he made them out of fabric. The problem with domes are, in high winds, they blow down. So there's, how do you get around this? Well, instead of a conventional dome, you can make what's called a geodesic dome, which has a network, a lattice work of aluminum poles. Those babies are great tents. They're also $500+ or more. Some of them run up into over 1,000. But here's one of the things you can do. Every place there's a pole, okay, you can sew a piece of Velcro, okay, to the inside of the fabric. Here's the nylon fly right here. So you sew a piece of nylon webbing to the outside, and you sew a piece of nylon webbing to the inside, and you attach that to Velcro. So Velcro is right here. The Velcro part is right here. So what you do is you wrap this around the Velcro, and then when you pull on this, you are pulling the pole, not the fabric. The point is, to stormproof a tent, you want to be pulling on pole, exoskeleton. You don't want to be pulling on fabric. Okay, now you can put as many of these on as you want. Now, if I had an inexpensive dome and I was going to take it to the Arctic, I'd have one here. I'd put another one down here. I might even put some up in here. The point is, you don't have to use all these. You only have to use them when a high wind comes up. All right, now this is your classic Eureka timberline. Now, I got to say, if you're looking for a real inexpensive tent that's excellent, you're not going to beat the timberline. You know, it's not the best sewn tent in the world. And if you buy into number of stitches per inch and things like that, when I was a reviewer for Backpacker magazine in the old days, we would consider stitches per inch and stuff like that. None of that counts. What counts is design. This tent will stand up to incredibly high winds if you do certain things. Now, here's the deal. When you buy one of these tents, it has a loop right over here. That's a storm loop. And the idea is, if you get a headwind, you want to run a guy line from that storm loop down to the ground. The problem is, if you do that, you're not pulling off an exoskeleton, you're pulling off of fabric. Fabric can tear. So you want to do the same thing back here that you did before. This is the fly. We're looking inside the fly now. This is under the fly, okay? And there's a little aluminum junction tube here. Those of you who have one of these tents, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What you want to do is you run your guy line right around that aluminum tube and stake down to the ground. That way you're pulling directly off the pole. Now notice I have twin lines here. The rule for guy lines are two lines are better than one, two stakes are better than one. So if you're faced with a super high wind, you want to run two lines straight out, not very far apart, each one on its own stake. In fact, if you want to do two stakes at different angles for each one, fine. Go ahead and do that, because that's even going to stiffen this baby up even more. Now, let's go to the side of the tent over here. If you get a strong side wind on one of these tents, it can blow that sidewall in, and which can contact the inner part of the tent, okay, which is not waterproof. That's the canopy. The canopy is not waterproof. The outer fly is waterproof. You don't want that to happen. So a lot of tents now, a lot of times they would have a storm point right here that you can run a line off of. And then they would have a connector that it's just a piece of parachute cord that goes from the outer fly and connects to the inner canopy. Point being, when you pull out the outer fly, and you don't have to strive for high C, is all you want. You just want it under enough tension so that a wind can't compress it against the inner tent. The idea being is when you pull this out, okay, it would also pull out the inner canopy, which would give you more interior room. Sounds like a great idea designed by some engineer who didn't spend enough time in the woods. What's wrong with this idea? Simple, really. Every time you pull on this, you are stressing the stitching that holds this piece of nylon that's sewn to the tent. Eventually, even if this stitching is well waterproof, if the wear and tear and the pulling on it all the time, you're going to get some leaks. So what's going to happen is water now is going to go through the outer fly and run right down that inner cord right into the tent on top of you. If you have an inner cord attached to one of your tents, my advice is just take a scissors and cut it off. Just don't use it. No, you're going to sacrifice a little interior space, but in a severe bad rain, you'll stay dry. Okay, this here shows how your line's attached to the pole, not to the fabric. Okay, now the bow line is one of the knots we're going to learn, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. All right, here's an example of an inner cord pulling out the inner canopy. Cut it. You'll lose a little space, but you'll stay dry. If any rain gets through here. All right, here's a question for you old timers. Let's pretend that I have a double wall tent like this. This is the outer rain fly. This is the canopy. The canopy is not waterproof. The fly is. I take a pin and I make a pinhole in this fly. And it rains, now it's raining really hard. Water will go through that pinhole. The question is, will you get wet? If you said no, you're exactly right. You will not get wet. Why? Because any water that gets through here will harmlessly, because of cohesive action, follow the inner wall of that fly all the way to the ground. And this is another reason why you do not want a single wall tent, period. Even a single wall Gore-Tex tent, which, by the way, under certain conditions, Gore-Tex tents, one word defines them: disaster. Absolute disaster. Talk to my friend Rob Kesselring about the disastrous $600 Gore-Tex tent he once took on the Noatak River in Alaska. I was with him on that trip. He'll talk your ear off about it. Because if you have any single wall tent and any hole gets in it, bingo, the water's falling on you is what's going to happen. Okay. Okay, knots. Honestly, folks, there's only 3 you need to learn. 2 half hitches for tying to a pole, a sheet bend. Now this is an old hitch. This thing came over on the Mayflower with John Smith and the boys. And it was called a sheet bend because the mainsail of the boat is called the main sheet. And if that, in those days, they were being manila ropes, plant material ropes. They didn't have nylon and stuff. If that rope snapped, and sometimes it did, you had to have a knot to tie it back together again. And there were only two that qualified. One was called a carrick bend, which you don't want to learn. It's just a fancy, nice looking knot that doesn't do anything that a sheet bend won't do. So this is a single sheet bend. And you can tie two slippery ropes together. You can tie a big rope with a tiny piece of parachute cord and it will hold. Now, if you're a built-in suspenders person, you can do what's called a double sheet bend. You can take this free end of the rope here, you can wind it around and you can go through this loop one more time. That's a double sheet bend. If you were rescuing somebody off a cliff or something, you'd probably want to use a double sheet bend. It's more secure. Now, I suggest you learn the quick release sheet bend. It's the same as a regular sheet bend, except you make a little loop and you come back through like so. This is sort of like tying your shoes when you tie a bow. So you can pull on this as a quick release. Now you're going to use this quick release sheet bend every time you put up a tarp or a tent where you have to daisy chain two ropes together. You tie them with a quick release sheet bend, and you're going to have a lot of them tied all over the place if the wind is blowing really hard. But one pull, and that hitch will come right out. So that's your second knot. Here's your third knot. This is, I didn't know the name of this when I first discovered this. There was no name for it, so I called it a power cinch because it's a very powerful cinch. Okay. Later, I learned it did have a name. After all, it was called the trucker cinch. At any rate, it's a wonderful knot. You can use it. You can put a canoe on top of your car, and this is a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage when you do this. Okay, this is 2-to-1 right here. All right. Now, if you could even get a 3-to-1 out of this if you wanted to for rescue by making another loop right in here in this rope, coming back through that loop and pulling in the other direction. It's basically what rescuers call a Z-drag. So you can use this for rescue, and you can use it for all sorts of things. Now, the old taut line hitch, remember that some people you knew when they were Boy Scouts? Or the kicker is when you buy a new tent, it comes with these little metal or plastic doohickeys that you wind it around and you hook this thing together to keep your tent up. That's another disaster. That's stupid. Why? Because first of all, it's time. They're time consuming to do. Secondly, if you wanted to go around a tree with it, you can't because you have to disconnect the whole system. So you're much better off use this instead of a taut line hitch. Now, those old timers, you'll remember the taut line hitch was useful in the days of canvas tents, cotton tents. Why? Because when a cotton tent gets wet, it shrinks. When a nylon tent gets wet, it expands. So this is way better. It's just a way better. Get the taut line hitch out of your head. It died when nylon tents came out. Okay. Now, when a storm comes up, you don't have a lot of time. You don't need to go around adding storm cords. This should be done ahead of time. For example, this is one of my tents here, and you can see I have approximately a 6-foot length of cord attached to it. Every storm loop, I have one of these cords attached to it, about 6 feet long. Now, when these aren't in use, they're just sort of rolled up and tied with a quick release knot. The only time I use them is when I have to. Now, why do I have this cord on here? Because maybe this is rocky and I can't get a cord. I can't get a stake in here. Maybe I can get one in here. Maybe I can get one in here. I got the cord to do it. Or maybe there's a root right over here or a tree that I can go around and hook to. which brings us to the next stormproofing point. If possible, anchor to something that's not movable, which means go around a tree or a boulder or a root or something like that. All right. This is probably the supreme don't in my estimation. And it's a fight. This is a battle I have with people. It's called put the ground cloth inside your tent. Don't put it outside your tent. I mean, I hate to go into a rant here, but I'm going to say unqualifiedly, if you canoe and camp long enough, you're going to find yourself in a rain that's going to be a real gully wumper, one that's going to go on for not just hours, maybe days. The river may come up a dozen feet. Meanwhile, everything around you is going to be flooded. And I don't care how well you pitched your tent, you got water coming in. You're not going, the only way you're going to keep it out is to do what nobody is supposed to do, which is dig a big ditch around your tent, which both the American and Canadian government are not going to be very happy with you doing that. So you have to build a waterproof system inside the tent. Now, there are those people who say, I'm saving the floor of my tent by doing this. And I'm going to tell you, you're not. And I'm going to say to you, I've had Cannondale rustic tents for over 20 years. I used to outfit and guide canoe trips in northern Canada for the Science Museum in Minnesota. Many of our trips were above the timberline. A lot of them were on the tundra. And those tents were used by people who, no, I mean, they weren't, mean to the tents or anything, but hey, it's not my tent, okay? In all the years I had these tents, I never got a single hole in the floor of a single tent. And those tents had been used over 100 times each. Old ideas die hard. Now, I want to go into a little mini rant on this because I want to share another observation with you, because sometimes what appears obvious is not. Example, when we started building wood strip solo canoes years ago, they were covered with fiberglass on the top and on the inside and outside the hull. When we would hit a rock and damage it, we noticed that the brakes were always an inside brake. It was called a green stick brake. In other words, if you take a green stick and you bend it, it compresses on the bottom, elongates on the top, and the place it breaks is always at the elongation point. All right? All right. If you have a ground cloth underneath your tent, now think about it, or forget the ground cloth. If you don't have any ground cloth inside or outside your tent, and you have a waterproof floor in your tent, which you do, the waterproof coating is on the inside of the floor, not on the outside. So every time you shove a foam pad down that tent, you're scraping off a micro thin layer of that waterproof coating. If a thorn starts to come up through the bottom of the tent, and you could watch it in slow motion, what's going to happen is it's going to start pushing upwards on the tent floor. And the first thing to go is going to be the Kenyan waterproof cake coat on the inside. It's going to break. And as soon as that breaks, the thorn will start popping through. So if you actually want to prevent the damage, what you do is you don't put the patch underneath the floor, you put it inside the floor. We did this with our wood strip canoes. We woke up one morning and we said, hey, we keep putting more fiberglass on the outside of the hull, and the hull keeps breaking. Let's try the inside. So you know what we did? We put a little football layer of Kevlar on the inside. When we got Kevlar later on, before that, we used a football layer of glass. Bingo, problem solved. Sorry, folks, old ideas die hard. Now, put the ground cloth inside. This happens to be a picture of your old friend, the Boundary Waters canoe area. This happens to be Ham Lake on a spring canoe trip. As you can see, everything's flooded. I'm not kidding you, we must have got 4 or 5 inches of rain inside of an hour and a half. It just came down like a blinding sheet. Everything was soaked. Watch. Look at it, soaked. Yeah. You think that exterior ground cloth's going to help you? Watch this. Okay, now here's an interior ground cloth. Okay, you can see the floor is completely flooded. Yet, if you are on the, notice the ground cloth is a foot larger than the tent all around, so it wraps up the sidewalls. You will stay dry. Now, my wife said don't tell any stories, but I have to tell you this one. Many years ago, one of the trips I guided in northern Canada was down the North Knife River to Hudson Bay. Plane dropped us off at North Knife Lake. He said, he dropped half the crew off. He said, I'll be back in about 3 hours. He took off. Pretty soon the lake stood on edge. We had 5-foot rollers out there. Nobody's going anywhere. Guess what? The plane dropped us off in a swamp. Why a swamp? That was the only place he could land and get us ashore. So we're walking around on this swamp. I still remember, it used to be, you stood still, water would come over your boot, would come over about an inch above your boot, and it would stop. We walked all over the swamp trying to figure out what to do. Time passes. 4 hours later, things are getting worse. We know this guy's not coming back today. So we had to pitch our tents in the swamp. Fortunately, every tent had an interior ground cloth, and they all looked like this. However, everybody reported very pleasant sleeping. They said it was like sleeping on a waterbed, which is exactly what it was. If we hadn't had those interior ground sheets, we'd have been soaking wet, miserable. Okay? Old ideas die hard. Now, I know there are people that are going to say, well, I've done this for years. I've never had a problem. You know what? Things just have not gotten bad enough for you yet. Keep going, keep tripping. They will someday, and you'll get the message. Then you'll never look back. Now, if I sound opinionated, I have another name for it. I call it wisdom. And that's been born from lots and lots of trips where bad stuff has happened. All right, stakes and lines. My advice is just don't go into the nearest camping store and just buy a bunch of stakes, because here's the deal. You're going to pitch your tent on a lot of different surfaces, and some stakes work best for some things, other stakes work best for other things. Let's see what we have here. I carry a bunch of stakes, and furthermore, if the manual says my tent needs 8 stakes to set up, I will carry a minimum of 12, probably 16. I'll double the number of stakes. Because if you got to stormproof your tent and you're using those storm loops, you got to have the stakes for them. Okay, these are my favorites. These are 12-inch long aluminum arrow shaft stakes. They are my favorite. You can get them from Cook Custom Sewing, though right now I don't know how much Cook is doing business. I'm afraid Dan Cook had a serious operation and he's still recovering at home, but his son you may be able to get them from him. But anyway, you don't see the 12 inchers. You see the 6 inchers. Sorry, that's too short. You want as long a stake as you can get, because sometimes you got to run that baby deep into the ground to hold. So I love these 12-inch stakes. They're expensive. They're about $1 a piece, maybe $2 a piece. I don't care what they cost. They're worth it. So I have some of these. This is your typical Boundary Waters rock stake because it fits in between rocks. Sometimes you need that. These are some pound-em stakes. Sometimes the ground is so hard, well, no matter how hard it is, you can get these in. But there are times when stakes like this work best. So if my tent needs 8 stakes, I'm going to take 16. Now, of the 16, probably 10 of them are going to be like this. And then I'll have some, then I might have, if it's Boundary Water stuff, I would probably have 8, whatever my tent needed, these basic stakes, and always 1 or 2 more because you never know. Okay, next question. Can you pitch your tent on a short site? This particular tent is an old Cannondale Aroostook. It's no longer manufactured. It's one of my most favorite all-time tent. Notice how the hem of the fly stakes right to the ground. That way you can't get wind and blowing rain coming up underneath it. This is important. Now, those people who are rolling their eyes at this, I would say, you know what? Look at the best European tents. They all have flies that go right to the floor. Well, why don't American tents? I'll tell you why. Because Europeans who camp out, I think by and large, take it more seriously than Americans do. And the tents are very expensive. And so they want a tent that's going to hold up in the super severe weather. So what do you see in European tents? You see basically the fly goes all the way to the ground and the interior canopy is connected permanently to the fly. Why is this important? Because when it's raining bloody murder and you want to get your tent up, if the interior part of the tent is connected to the fly, the tent will go right up and be dry inside. But if you have an interior canopy that you have to set up and it's raining bloody murder, before you can get the fly on, you're going to be soaking wet. Some manufacturers are going to tell you that, oh, the removable fly, that's great for ventilation. Oh, come on, get out of my office. You want ventilation, open the doors up. All right? Okay, old ideas die hard. Read any camping book on the planet and they will tell you when you camp on this is exaggerated, obviously you would never sleep on an incline like this. They would tell you always keep your head up, your head here on an incline. It's in every camping book in the world, except mine. Mine's a little different. I suggest you don't sleep this way. Why? Because you're going to be rolling downhill all night long. And if you put something to raise your legs up, you're probably going to wake up with a backache in the morning and you're still going to slide downhill. Instead, try this. Keep an open mind. Try it. You'll be pleasantly surprised. Sleep on an angle to the slope. You have a bunch of here's your phone. Your phone pad is underneath you. You have a bunch of extra clothes and stuff you're not wearing. Just prop up the downhill side of your pad. So what happens is it's going to make a little bit of a U. Okay? And you're going to be sleeping right in the center of that U. You won't be sliding right or left, uphill or downhill. And you'll be more comfortable this way than you would if you're downhill. Try it. Old ideas die hard. All right, cover your sleeping pad. Now, I don't know about you, but my sleeping pad is I use both the Nemo and X-Ped. Those are my two favorites at this point. They both have a nylon outer surface. And if you sleep bare skin against that, it's not very comfortable on a hot night. Indeed, the last time I can think of when I slept on a waterproof mattress when I was about 2. Okay, so I suggest you cover your sleeping pad with something. This one happens to have Nemo's cover on it. It's a wonderful cover. The problem with covers where manufacturers try to offer these for their pads, but people just sort of rolled their eyes and they couldn't sell. So now hardly anybody offers these. But you can make one out of a cotton sheet, ultra lightweight merino wool, polyester. Okay, but it needs to be breathable. Now, the advantage of having a cover is several-fold. First of all, your pad won't slide around on the slippery. You can see the plastic ground cloth in the tent. Okay, your pad won't slide around. Secondly, it'll keep your pad cleaner. When you get home, all you have to do is wash the cover. Thirdly, this nice breathable material against your body will absorb perspiration. You'll stay drier and much more comfortable. Okay, bring a stool. Now, there's a lot of different stools out there. I just noticed recently some cost upwards of $150 for a little stool you take apart. So here's something I want you to consider. As a backpacker, that's probably the kind of stool you want. Something that will take apart, be very, very tiny, super lightweight. You can shove it in your pack. Great, that's backpacking. I'm a canoeist. We're different. Why are we different? Because canoeing looks like this. You're out there paddling along, and then all of a sudden you come to, oh, dread, a portage, or as the Canadians say, portage. Now you have to pick up everything and go. So here's the deal. You're going to do it in 2 or 3 trips, maybe 4 trips. If you're going to the Arctic or something like that, or you're going to do a trip that's several weeks long, you're probably going to have more like 4 trips across the portage. And so let's say halfway through that portage, you get tired and you want to sit down and rest. The problem is everything is soaking wet. The only place to sit is on a damp log. Oh, I know. Let's open our pack and take our little teeny chair and let's all put it together and sit on that. Come on, you're not going to do that. Let's try something different. This is the kind of chair that I recommend. It just folds up. This is aluminum. It has legs that won't sink into the ground. It has a little zippered pouch here where you can store stuff. Now, the way I discovered this was when I was in the Army. When I was in the Army, I was on the U.S. Army rifle team. And when we would go online, get ready to shoot, we had a chair like this, and we had our ammo in the little zippered pocket, and we had our cleaning rod and so forth. And we would bring this chair up to the line, and we would just sit down and we'd wait until it was our turn to shoot. I thought that's a keen chair, man. I'm going to get one for camping when I get out of the Army. Now, the only place I know you can get this that I know of is Paragus Northwoods Company in Ely. Why Paragus? I don't know, because I pestered them to get this chair and they had to look real hard to try to find it. I'm sure they're available elsewhere, but if they are, you want to be sure the frame's aluminum, not steel. Okay? And so that's pretty hard to find. Now, how do I carry this? Like this. Here's the chair. When I want the chair, I just fold, or when I don't want the chair, I fold it up like so, and I just snap it to the front of my pack like you see here. If I want to sit down in the middle of a portage, I unclip this, bingo, and the whole chair comes out and I'm ready to sit down. Now, this also has the advantage of you're canoeing down a river. You want to stop for lunch. There's no place to get out and sit, but you want to sit and you don't want to be in your canoe. So you step out with your waterproof boots on. You open your chair right in the middle of the river in 6 or 8 inches of water, and you can sit down and have your lunch. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. And by the way, I think this chair only is about $39 or something. Okay, but that's an option. All right, cozies. You know, I discovered this system years ago when I was leading canoe trips in the Arctic for the Science Museum, Minnesota. And when you're cooking for 10 people, just to get, well, 10 people, if everybody has 3 cups of food, that's 30 cups of food you're cooking. That's a big pot. And in order to get that to boil, it's not easy. I tried everything. For a while, I used 2 stoves with a rack above it. Then one day I was in a tea shop and I saw a tea cozy and I said, hey, grandma's got the right idea. So I made up these cozies. Okay. This is actually made of, this can be made of wool. Wool makes a great cozy. Insulated ironing board material makes a great cozy. What doesn't make a great cozy is acrylic, because acrylic gets hot and scrunches right up. Now, you're going to have to make these yourself because there's no market for them. So basically, here's how I make all of my meals. One, the first thing I do is I say I'm going to make pasta. I put the water in the pot, cover the pot, put the cozies on, turn up the heat, walk away, do camp chores. Pretty soon I see steam coming out from underneath this cozy top. I take the top off, add the pasta, okay, the spaghetti or whatever, and I give it a stir until it's all evenly stirred in. That's maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Then I take the pot off, stick it on a closed cell phone pad, put the cozy top on it, and close it up. Now, why do I have a 2-part cozy? Because when you take this top off to check if it's windy, you don't want the whole side of this pot cooling off instantly. The sideband will keep that from happening. Now, once I've done this, if I'm cooking for, say, a crew of 10 people or something like that, this is a lot of food to cook. I might now throw a jacket over the top of this whole thing. Now I'm going to walk away. I'm probably going to have a scotch. I'm going to sit there and drink my scotch and enjoy the evening. And I'm going to let this baby self-cook for approximately 15 minutes or 20 minutes, depending. Then I'm going to come back, take the top off, serve. Everything's going to be done. You will have stew and not glue. The idea of stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring and evaporating water out, no. Use the cozy system. Now, if this works in summer, try it in winter. And I would say this is one of the most effective things that I've come up with. All right. In this picture, this happens to be along the Copca River in Ontario. That's me when I was just a wee bit younger. This is, you can see the cozy band on this big pot. Then I will have a cozy cover for it. Now, I even have cozies for my teapot. So when I make coffee in the morning, I cozy that up, put it on a closed cell phone pad, and this stuff stays hot for seconds or thirds. All right, this is what I call a backpacking cozy. All it is just this. So now what I'm going to do with this thing here, I'm just going to shut the stove off. I'm going to put this thing on the top of it, and that's it. This will pretty much self-cook, and it will stay hot for quite a while. You can't believe how much heat is lost through that cover. All right, waterproof your sleeping bag. Now I have to tell a story here. This must have been about 10 years ago. I took my oldest daughter, Clarissa, on a canoe trip to the Boundary Waters. Now, Clarissa does not like camping and canoeing at all, but she's not so madly loves her daddy to Mises Pieces, okay? So anyway, I took her. So as we're coming in, this is the first portage off of, not Ham Lake, right before you get into Ham Lake. And it was raining. And the canoe is just coming over the portage our way as we're going the other way. And I looked in the canoe, and there was a sleeping bag laying in the bottom of the canoe. It was soaking wet. It was in water, about 2 inches or 3 inches of water. And I just sort of quipped off, well, hey, you guys, I guess you don't believe in waterproof bags. And the guy sort of mumbled something like, well, no matter, it's our last day and we're on our way out. And then as we were paddling off, Clarissa says to me, Dad, that was really cruel. You really hurt that man's feelings. You know, that's really wasn't nice. And so I mumbled something to her like, well, the guy was an idiot. What do you expect? Daddy, that's terrible. I just think that's awful. Okay, long story short, it was raining and raining and raining. So we put in at a campsite. I put up twin flies, put the tent up, made a fire. We're enjoying life. And it rained for 3 solid days. We couldn't move. Finally, on day 4, well, that was about the end of our trip because it was a short trip because she'd flown in all the way from Los Angeles, didn't want to spend all of her time in the Boundary Waters. We started out. So we're on our way out. And as we're on our way out, deja vu, man, all of a sudden there's another canoe pulls up alongside us. And I'm looking inside the canoe. Oh, my God, same deal. There's a sleeping bag laying on the floor in water. And Clarissa turns to them and says, I guess you guys don't believe in waterproof bags. So the point is that people think they're going to the Boundary Waters. Oh, I can get away with anything. Yes, you can. The Boundary Waters isn't going to kill you. But you do some of this stuff in an Arctic canoe trip or a Northern Canada canoe trip, and you can either be pretty miserable or you can die. So here's how I suggest you waterproof your sleeping bag. All right, now, first of all, this is supposedly a waterproof stuff sack. Who are you kidding? There's a big hole in the end. Like, yeah, it's waterproof stuff sack. As all that means is any water that gets in is going to stay in. I know what a lot of people are going to do is they're going to go down to their nearest camping store and they're going to buy a waterproof bag for about $30 or $40, and they're going to pack their sleeping bag in that. You can do that if you want, but here's the deal. Every time you stuff a bag into a pack, you are damaging that bag some. Damaging. Do it enough times, you will scrape enough waterproof material off the inside of that bag that eventually you will damage it. Or maybe you'll just get a hole in the bag. Instead, here's a simple system. First, stuff your sleeping bag into a stuff sack. It need not be waterproof. In fact, you know what? It's better if it isn't because it's breathable. So you won't pick up odors as much. All right, then take that and put that in a waterproof bag. Now try this little test before you do. Blow up the bag, okay? And see if it holds air. If it holds air, fine. If it doesn't, that's why God invented duct tape, okay? Then twist this thing around and bungee cord it, okay? Twist it around and bungee cord it. It's called goosenecking. That's what the Boy Scouts call it anyway. Now that we have girls in the Boy Scouts, the girls call it that too. Okay. Then take another bag and put this whole thing in this other bag. So what you have now done is this sleeping bag, which is inside here, is now protected on the inside and the outside by 2 protective layers. This thing, you toss the thing out in the lake, it can roll around for a week and it'll stay dry. Some of you may have my long out of print book. There's a story in there about a guy that tipped over in Canada that this is exactly what happened and everything was dry. Simple system, works well, especially if you're taking kids. They don't have a lot of money. The system works great. All right, real quickly, bugs. I can't do a dissertation on bugs, but I can just share with you a few things that I've discovered. 1, bugs love blue, navy blue to be exact. Look at the yellow, look at the blue. I think you can see the difference. Ironically, talk to anybody who works in the equipment shop, and they will tell you the most popular color for outdoor clothing is navy blue. My advice to you is avoid navy blue for anything you're going to do in the outdoors if there's bugs around. Here's another example. All right, now here, if you look here on this pack, this is powder blue. This is navy blue. You can see the bugs on the navy blue, can't you? Okay. There may be, I don't know if these are bugs or not, but they're all here. All right, now look at this one. Oh, look at all the bugs here. That's not navy blue. No, but it's a dark color. Dark colors trap heat, and that obviously encourages these insects to land. Now, these 2 packs are just sitting, one right next to another, so I think you get the point. Okay, this is a Susie bug net. Now, when Susie, my wife Susie, made these, everybody laughed at her till she started taking this on a canoe trip. Then suddenly everybody wanted to borrow it, and Susie was not a happy camper. Now, you can eat your meal inside of it. You can use it as a sheet, light sheet at night if it's real hot. If it's really buggy and you want to jump in the water, she would put this on. She'd walk into the water with her bathing suit on, and this bug out, it would just sort of go up like this and just sort of float along on the water, and then she would do her swim. She'd swim around underwater, then she'd swim right back into the bug net and walk back up on shore. And of course, this works equally well in a place like the Boundary Waters, where you have the throne. Put it over you while you're on the throne, and you will be fine. Now, you can buy one of these from Cook Custom Sewing. They're about $50. Or you can make one according to my plans. Those plans are in 2 books. One is Camping's Top Secrets. The other is Canoeing Wild Rivers. Now, just a note about making your own. In the early it was around 1910 or 1911 when George Washington Sears, I believe it was, who went under the name of Nessmuk, wrote in his book, head nets should be black. No other color works as well. Why? Because every other color but black, it reflects the color right into your eyes, whereas black doesn't. Now, if you want to try an experiment, you take a head net, or you take any netting on your tent that is any color other than black, and you take a black magic marker and you make the panel, color the panel black. Look through it. You won't believe what you see. Looking through the black, you'll be looking like you're looking through plate glass. Looking through any other color, you're going to get reflection into your eyes. So why is it then that tent makers make their netting every color but black. Why? Because they're catering to market research. People, oh, I don't like a black color. I would like a pretty yellow color. Oh, I like white. What about a soft orange? Sure, we'll give you whatever you want, but it doesn't work. You can't see through it. Case in point, why do you think it is that German cars like BMWs, Mercedes-Benz, all have black dashboards and black steering wheels? No other colors. Why? Because any color on that dashboard other than black reflects light into your eyes and you can't see as well. For the same reason, you'll notice German cars also have red dash lights. Every military vehicle, from self-propelled howitzers and tanks to airplanes, all have red interior lights. Why? Because it's the only color that doesn't affect your visual purple, meaning that you can see perfectly at night, and you can also read the information. You can also read your speedometer and such without your eyes adjusting. But hey, if you want a white dashboard, we'll give you a white dashboard. There's the Susie bug net. Gives you an idea how to make it. You can sleep in it, whatever. Okay, a word or two about repellents. Now, a lot of people these days are worried, for some reason, they're concerned about DEET, which is diethyl metatoluamide. Now, DEET has been around since World War II. It's been used in jungle warfare all over the world. Sorry to tell you, folks, it's a pretty safe chemical. But if you don't want it on your skin, there's some tricks, okay? We're going to look at them. One is what's called a bonding-based sunblock. You know, there's an old saying in science, you can't, if you two molecules can't occupy the same place at the same time. In other words, if you have sunblock filling the pores of your skin and you put bug repellent on top of that, the sunblock is going, it can't, the repellent can't get through the sunblock to your skin. Make sense? All right, there's two kinds of sunblock. There's a regular kind that's kind of like lays on top of your skin, and there's the other kind which is called a bonding base. It sort of goes into your pores and bonds. So what you do is you put the bonding base on first, and you leave it for a few minutes, and then you go ahead and you put your insect repellent on top of that. The insect repellent will stay right on top of the sunblock and will not be absorbed into your skin. Now we're going to talk about another product here. This is called permethrin. Now, those of you that are gardeners are probably familiar with this product because it's widely used against ticks. Okay, it's used on clothing. We'll get to this in a little bit. All right, now Sawyer makes a product called insect repellent military style clothing treatment. If you buy military clothing, or when GIs, if they were to go into a war or whatever, into a place where insects were problematic, they would be issued clothing that had an insect repellent that was right into the clothing, okay? And what they use for this is permethrin. Now, Sawyer makes a treatment version of this. It's basically the same thing as what the Army uses, only on a small scale. What you get is you get a bottle of repellent that looks like this, okay? This is permethrin. You put your clothes in this plastic bag, which they give you. You pour the entire bottle of permethrin in there. You seal it up, and then you leave it alone for several hours. Then you take the clothing out, and you hang it up, and you let it air dry for several hours. Then you put it on. This will withstand about a half a dozen washings. You won't have to do it again for about a half a dozen washings. Now, some of you are reading these, will read these warning labels, and it will say, all these little dangers and things like that. I talked to the chemists. I talked to them at Sawyer, and I asked them these questions, and they said these warnings are on there for a reason. A, we have to put them on. B, if you put this stuff next to your skin instead of on clothing, it actually makes the product, what do I say? The product that won't work. It it somehow keeps the product from doing what it's supposed to do. So this is designed for use on clothing, not on people. Now, you can get you can get permethrin at any garden shop. The difference is it doesn't smell very good. The Sawyer product smells fine. My advice, get the Sawyer product. That way your friends won't smell you coming. Okay. All right. I just want to share with you, whoops, let me back up here. I just want to share with you some of the things. We're going to talk a little bit about these newfangled repellents that don't contain DEET. Frankly, friends, they don't work very well. Let's look. Now, this is from Consumer Reports magazine. All right. Here you go. 98% DEET, 92% effect. 3M Ultrathon. At 34% DEET, it's 72% effect. Aha, stop. How could this be? All right, now watch this. This is a pump. If it's a pump, it's going to be pumping this product through a tiny nozzle. You can't have a cream base. You can't have an alcohol base. You can't have a cream base. You have to have an alcohol base so it will pump. Well, as soon as you pump that, you put it on your skin, the alcohol begins to evaporate. And then you're left with what's left of the DEET, which will start evaporating. But if it's in a cream base, okay, you can't pump it. You have to like put it on because it's thicker. Notice half of that amount or less than half of that amount is almost equally effective. So think about this when you buy the repellents. The cream base is almost always more effective than an alcohol base or whatever they're using for the delivery. Okay, here's 30% DEET. It's about the same. All right, 30% DEET, about the same. Okay, now notice these 30% are all around 70% effective. Then we're going to get down here. Here's 20%. It's starting to drop now. So 33% is the warm spot. Now we're going to get way back here. Now we're going to go. Here's picaridin. Picaridin is a new synthetic aerosol. It's one of these new designer environmentally friendly things. 40%. Skintastic, 33. Aloe vera, 33. Let's get all like Cutterall family, 7% DEET. You're down to 30%. Skin So Soft. Skin So Soft was never originally, they never said it would repel insects. Some people found it did. Yeah, it's real effective at 24. But then when you finally get down to these nature ones, they're basically zero. Now, one thing I want to leave you with before we leave this diagram. These things have been tested by Consumer Reports Laboratory against mosquitoes. I'm going to say that again. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are mild-mannered, folks. But if you've done any Arctic canoe trips, you know black mosquitoes are nothing. Black flies are the terror. Not much works for black flies. I have slathered myself with pure DEET. I've had black fly land in it, swim through it, and take off and fly again. The only thing that really works against black flies is a lot of DEET. Consider this when you're getting stuff. Okay, enough of that. Real quickly, water. I know I'm going over time. I'm sorry, but I think you'll find that a few more minutes worth it. If you're going out west and you're going to canoe rivers like the San Juan, the Green, the Rio Grande during parts of the year, your water is going to look like chocolate malt. So what everybody does is they carry their water when they canoe. I don't know about you, but you need to carry a gallon of water per person per day. Gallon of water weighs close to 9 pounds. You're going for 10 days. You want 90 pounds of water in your canoe, you go for it. Ain't happening in mine. Instead, there's a simpler, easier, and more practical solution, and it's called alum. And you can get this at any pharmacy. A big bottle like this, I don't know, I bought this 10 years ago. I still got enough left. Cost me $10 10 years ago. Maybe it's $20 now or 25. I don't know. But one bottle will last you forever. Here's how it works. What you do is you get yourself a big bucket like this. This is about a 2.5 gallon bucket. You pour the water in there. This is what it looks like. Terrible. you take 1 tablespoon, a lightly heaping tablespoon of alum, no more. Seems like if you add too much, it doesn't work well. Pour that in, and then take a spoon or stick and stir it very slowly in one direction. Slowly in one direction. Don't go like that. Slowly around and around like this. Now, you will notice in about 1.5 minutes it'll take, this, you're going to start to see what we used to call, when I taught science, a flocculent precipitate. That means it looks like snow and it's starting to settle out. As soon as you see that flock, stop stirring, go away for 20 minutes. Okay? And here's what you're going to see. This one, we're still stirring. Look at this one. Clear as a bell. Now, if you look at the bottom, you can see the flock down here. You don't want to get in here with a dipper and go zip, because you're going to stir this mess all back up again. Okay? What happens is the alum attracts the particles and gets heavy and goes to the bottom. Then what you do is you drag off very carefully, like with a ladle or Sierra cup. You drag it off. You can see how clean these are now. And then you run it through your pump or your SteriPen or whatever you're using, and bingo, you've got clear water. Now, we have used this on every canoe trip we've done in the Western United States. In fact, the worst one was the last trip we did on the Rio Grande, where it had rained and rained and rained and rained, where the river was literally 5 feet high, and it was so muddy that you literally, if you put your hand in, you could not see 1 centimeter into the water, and it worked just fine. You know, before I leave this, we'll leave you all with a thought. I have a number of friends who they have all this fancy water purification equipment they bring on canoe trips. But you know what? They carry their own water. They don't trust the stuff. Let me tell you something. These units have to be certified by the government in order to be effective and to be sold on the market. And with rare exceptions, unless you live in Chicago and are getting city water, which is among the best city water in the country, what you're pumping through one of these pumps or running through a SteriPen, which kills everything, including viruses and spores, you're getting better water than if you got it out of the tap. If you buy one of these purifiers, trust it. All right, real quick, like we're going to finish up with fire. This is one of my favorite things. It's called a little bug stove. It comes apart in 2 pieces, takes up no space at all in a pack, and it can produce a huge campfire with this. And the good news is, if you get a pizza pan, high-sided pizza pan, or a high-walled metal oil drain can, can like this, it will work. It will suffice instead of using one of these fire pans that you buy when you have to go out west and use a fire pan for camping. Now, I don't know what those fire pans weigh, but I think they're like 9 or 10 pounds. This thing weighs ounces. The whole system weighs ounces. And you'll always get a fire going in it because it's a true stove. All right. I'm going to go through I'm calling this making fire in the boundary waters where all the good wood's picked over. So what you do, you go out in the wood, it's been raining for days. You saw off a chunk of wood. You look at the end of it. It's probably going to have, this is going to be wet, about 1/4 inch in. Saw off that 1/4 inch of wet. Then do what I call the smell test. Take it up to your nose and smell it. Touch your lips to it. If it's wet, don't take it. Now, invariably, what's going to happen is there's going to be a ring around the outside, about 1/4 inch in, all the way around, that's going to be wet. But the inner part's going to be dry. Okay. Once you've done this, always do this, the smell test. Take your hatchet and have somebody pound the head on through like so. If you're going to Canada, if you're going to the boundary waters, if you're going on a canoe trip, Folks, don't leave your axe at home. It's one of the most valuable tools that you can have on a canoe trip. How are you going to split this? With a Swiss Army knife? Oh, maybe you'd rather get a splitting wedge and hold it right there with your hand and pound away. Would that be better? No. We've used this on trips with teenagers for years and years. This is the only method we allow for splitting. It works perfectly and nobody ever gets hurt. Split this out. Then, when you get to pieces like this, take your knife, and I suggest you bring a fixed blade knife. You don't have to wear it, but it's nice to have it. That way you can take a pretty good chunk and you can pound it through and make smaller and smaller pieces, okay? Or you can use your axe by standing this up, and I call this a keeper stick. You hold this keeper stick against the upright and you come down with the axe. You do not want to put your finger here and hold this, okay? That's the advantage of the keeper stick and the hatchet. Now you're going to keep splitting this stuff out until you get the smaller and smaller stuff. Now the rule is tinder should be no thicker than a match. So how do we do that? I'm going to show you a method. You're going to have to practice this method, but it always works. You take the knife and you hold it right against your gut, your belly. You turn the blade so the blade is forcing away from your hand. Now, normally, if you were cutting, the blade would be reversed this way. The blade is facing backwards. You hold the knife steady. Then you powerfully rake your hand. Whoops. Then you powerfully rake your hand to the left. Rake it. And you're going to start getting long, thin shavings like you see here. Now, the beauty of this is, even if you don't even have a sharp knife, if you have one of these little mini Leathermen with these tiny little inch-long knife blades, you can use this method and you can create good size shavings. Now you'll have to practice this a bit. Remember, you're moving the stick. You're not moving the knife, okay? Remember, the blade goes inside, okay? Towards you, not away from you. Okay, pretty soon we're going to have stuff that looks like this. It's all lined up. All right, now, I'm showing this just to show you size. This is a tin can lid. This is how big your firebox should be. Now, we're only going to use this method in a place where all the good wood's been picked over, or it's been raining bloody murder and everything's wet. Now, why am I showing this? Because most people who build a fire, the firebox is too big. They make the firebox real big. Hey, the match is only going to light a spot the size of a nickel. There's no sense having a tinder box much larger than that. So I'm going to remove this and we're going to do three support sticks. These support sticks are about as thick as a thin pencil. Next, we're going to go back and forth across, over and over, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until we have this built up to about 1 inch. Now, these are with small, thin sticks. These sticks are maybe about 1.5 times the thickness of a match. Now, right now, I could light a match underneath this, and this thing would go up in flame. But it will also probably blow away in the wind. So we want to lock it in place. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to put a bridge stick here and a bridge stick here, okay? And then I'm going to run a support stick here and another support stick here. Then I'm going to bridge across this with bigger sticks. This locks this whole thing in place. Oh, by the way, my 90-minute video, The Forgotten Skills, goes through this whole thing in video format. So you can actually see me lighting the fire and so forth and so on. So if you want those skills, get the video. All right, so now I'm going to light it. And now before I light it, let's look at a trick. I would call this a Boundary Waters, Adirondacks, any place you have balsam fir or spruce trees. This happens to be a balsam fir. Now the balsam fir will get these knobs on. Here's a knob right here. Here's a knob little blister here. Now I'm breaking this blister with a pointed stick. Now you're going to find balsam fir trees on most Boundary Waters campsites. Find one, find the blisters. Here's another one over here. Break it. Here's another one over here, and so forth. And you're going to have it right on the edge. Then light a match to it, and this stuff is like kerosene. So now you know why these conifer forests burn like they do when there's a forest fire. So this is a neat little trick. By the way, if you're taking teenagers and you show them this trick, they're gonna bust every single thing on every single balsam fir tree for miles around. They're going to be running, lighting this up, making torches. So have some rules if you turn the kids loose on this. All right, now I'm lighting it. Now, because the way this fire is, it's going to burn from the bottom up. Heat goes up, not sideways. So we're going to wind up with a very bright smoke-free flame. Okay, notice how smoke-free this is. Just a hint of smoke. That's all you're getting, because you're getting draft under it, like a Japanese hibachi grill. Now watch, I can even put my hand right underneath it because the fire is burning above me. Now it's just a matter of adding more wood, and bingo, you are home free. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Again, this is my video, Forgotten Skills. It has the most important things on it. If you want to impress your friends, this will tell you how. And so with that, I will hang out here. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm sorry we ran about 20 minutes overtime.
Well, thank you, Cliff. Thank you for that. We do have a few questions in the chat, so I'm just going to go through them as they were posted. The first one we have is, which tent do you like?
Which tent do I like? You know, that's a really good question. And that pretty much has to be combined with how much do you want to spend for a tent and where are you going to use your tent. If you're going to use your tent in like the Boundary Waters and state parks and things, you know, just about, there's tons of them that will do. And if you want to go inexpensive and good, remember the name Eureka. Eureka tents are made in upstate New York. They understand about rain. They know rain. They are not necessarily the best made tents around, but they are all very well designed, and you won't go wrong. You won't go wrong with one of them. If you want to get more sophisticated, the one thing that, and I'm not going to say, I don't mean to say anything unkind about California tents, except in California it doesn't rain a lot, and so the premium, yeah, they're waterproof. I'm not saying they're not; they are. But the premium is really more on high winds for mountain hiking and snow loads for winter use, that sort of thing. So it depends what you're going to do. And you're going to spend a lot more money on tents like that. Nemo makes some good tents, but I would say, but I cannot recommend their airframe tent. They have a tent that uses an airframe instead of poles, standard poles. I think the airframe is fine unless you lose the pump, then you can't get the tent up. But Nemo has some nice tents. I think what you want to do is you want to crawl inside the tent and you want to do two things. One, you want to go around the tent and be sure there are no seams at ground level, that there are no seams at ground level. Yeah, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, all these seams are waterproofed with seam tape. Yes, they are these days. That's the good news. I'll tell you the bad news. If you're going to use that tent hard and you're going to use it for a long time, those seams are ultimately going to be stressed. They're going to get dirty and the tape is going to start coming loose in various places. And if that seam's at ground level, you got water coming in. So my thing is, sorry, no seams at ground level. The only excuse for that is if the fly covers all those seams and all the zippers. So you did ask me what my favorite tent is. And so I guess I will tell you. First, I'll tell you the name. If you talk to any European, they're going to tell you that the best tents in the world are made by Hilberg, H-I-L-L-I-B-E-R-G. Go to Hilberg.com and you'll see truly great tents. You may not be able to afford one because prices start at around $600 and go well over $1,000. Okay, I have a Hilberg Kadam, which is an ultralight tunnel style tent. It weighs honest weight is 7.8 pounds, which brings us to another interesting point. Since you asked about tents, was a great question. I don't know how this happened, but here in the US, we have this thing that says all tent canopies must be flame proof. Well, first of all, when was the last time you ever started a fire in your tent or burned a stove in your tent? People don't do that anymore. That's a carryover from when they did. But they got the rule through. So what happened is any American tent that's sold, any US tent, has to be flame proof. You know what? That flame proofing chemical is heavy. You want to know why American tents are so much heavier than European tents? Flame proofing. European tents don't have that spec, therefore they can be much lighter. In other words, I don't know what my Hilberg would weigh if the canopy was flame proof, but I would guess at least another pound, maybe more, because there's a lot of fabric there that has to be covered with chemicals. So anyway, that's my favorite tent. That was an excellent question. And by the way, if you check out my book, Camping's Top Secrets, it goes through a lot of specific on tents, things to look for, how to check them out, and you're going to find that information in the video too. Thank you for the question. That was a good one.
We have one from Melissa. Do you stake the tent body canopy separately from the fly?
Do you stake the tent? Okay. Do you stake the tent canopy separately from the fly? Is she asking?
Yeah.
A lot of tents are like that, where first what happens is you put up the canopy, you put the pole thing down, you put the poles together, then you start hanging the canopy from this, and then you stake all the way around, which holds the frame and the canopy up. Then you put the rain fly on top of the whole thing and stake the rain fly separately. That's why it's a pain in the ventricle. I don't like tents that are designed that way, though I do have one. Okay, I do have a Nemo that's built this way, and it's an ultralight tent. I use it for solo backpack or solo canoeing, but I don't like the separate fly deal. The problem is I don't know right now offhand any American tent that has a built-in fly. There must be one or two of them somewhere, but I haven't seen any, because the sales point on this is you can take the fly off and just have the netted canopy. Oh no, it's so nice to go to sleep looking at the stars. Yeah, we've done that. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, it starts to rain and you got to get out there and put the fly on. So I always use my tents with the fly on. Now, just a word about packing a tent. I'm glad you brought that up because it brought me to another point. If you pack a tent that has a separate fly, in other words, you have basically three parts. You got the poles and stakes, which should go in its own bag. You have the fly and you have the canopy. The fly will probably be wet. Bring another stuff sack just for the fly. In other words, pack the fly in its own stuff sack. So when you pack the entire tent in its tent bag, the wet fly isn't touching the dry canopy. Thank you. That was a great question.
She did. There was a second part to it. She did wonder if staking the tent separately from the fly helped the water drain out from the tent body.
If packing the tent separately from the fly.
So staking the tent. She was wondering if staking the tent separately helped to drain the water out from the tent body.
Well, with very rare exceptions, the only tent that comes to mind, I'm sure there are others, are those tents built on the Eureka Timberline format, where the fly or the canopy is staked out and then the fly attaches by a clip or hook or something to the canopy. A lot of tents are like this. The Nemos are like this, where they attach. You get the canopy up, you put the fly on, and then the fly has a clip that stakes it to the main part of the tent. That's a better deal than staking them out separately. Some tents you do stake out separately, some you don't. In the case of European tents that have the fly attached, you just stake out, you just do one set of stakes around, which is the outer fly, and everything is hooked in solid. So I'm not quite sure I understand what she means by the water drains out. I assume she is not, she doesn't mean that there's water getting inside the tent. Is she saying that?
Melissa, are you on?
Because if water gets inside your tent and you have an interior ground cloth, what you have to do is you got to pull the ground cloth out, dry the ground cloth, and then you got to turn the tent in, either leave the tent open at both ends and then let it dry. Now, I'm glad she brought this up, because let's take a situation where you've gone on a camping trip or canoe trip, and it just rains every day, and you just can't keep things dry. So what's actually happened now is you've got an interior ground cloth in your tent, but water's gotten into your tent. You just couldn't help it. The good news is you're dry because you got that inside ground cloth in there. Okay, then it quits raining. Okay, oh, now what are you going to do? So you pack up. You don't have time to dry your tent. You go to a new campsite, and bingo, you get the tent up and it just starts raining again. Oh, what are we going to do? The inside of the tent is still wet. The ground cloth is still wet, but wait, only one side of the ground cloth is wet. So now you take the ground cloth and you flip it over and you put it in the tent dry side up, and you're back in business again. I don't know if this answered the question, but maybe there were some tips there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So Jane is wondering how heavy your portage pack is.
How heavy my portage? Well, one of the things about, if you listen to people who go to the boundary waters year after year and have never gone beyond the boundary waters. Now, I don't mean this as an insult. I'm just saying their experience is limited to the BWCA, to basically program sites, okay? Things sometimes just don't get bad enough for them. So, and maybe they don't portage much. But if you go into Ontario or Northern Canada, you're going to be making some portages. And yes, I got to tell you, I've had some terrible portages in the BWCA, but I've had none that can compare with the first portage in Ontario on the Steel River, accessing the Steel River. Nothing. I've had some other portages. And the portage, when Susie and I got married, the portage around Wilberforce Falls in the Arctic was nearly 4 miles, 3.5 miles. Okay, these are tough portages. What am I leading up to? You don't want a pack that's too heavy because you got to carry it. Secondly, if you run rapids, well, even if you don't, and you capsize with the canoe, and you don't have your gear locked in there pretty solid, and that pack goes out, and you have a 70-pound pack, I got to tell you, unless you have a complete waterproof system built in that pack, it's gone. And even if you have a waterproof system in it, if it weighs 70 pounds dry, it's going to weigh 100 pounds wet. You won't rescue it. You won't be able to get it in the boat. It's too heavy. So when I led trips for the Science Museum, my rule was no pack over 50 pounds. None. I would rather have one pack at 45 and the next one at 35. Because you know what? If the portage is really good, I can stack 2 packs. Now there's one on the tump line and the other one on top. No, not one on your chest. Why? Because if you can't see your feet, You can trip and fall and get hurt real badly. In fact, that's was one of the cardinal rules on my canoe trips is you're not allowed to carry anything on your chest. It's too dangerous. So I would say you're better off with more light packs that can be stacked than you are with one heavy one. And while we're at that, we should also address this goofy thing about putting your food in a tree at night to keep it away from bears. We don't have time to deal with this. Read my books. There's a dissertation on bears, but you know what? Bears climb trees, and you're not going to put an 80-pound pack up a tree. And if you do have an 80-pound food pack and a bear gets into your pack, good. I hope you're close enough to home that you can get home in a day. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty hungry when you get home. So one of the rules for serious canoeing is you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't overload. Great question. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below.